Hey, today I go Anna read What If Leah Returned with a Child and Found Love in a New Wolf. So before we start, here a mini summary. After heartbreak shattered her world, Leah Clearwater walked away, pregnant, abandoned, and betrayed by the one she loved most. Years later, she returns to La Push for her father's funeral, not as a wolf, but as a mother. But fate isn't done with her yet. There, amidst old wounds and silent goodbyes, she crosses paths with Embry Call, newly transformed and pulled by a force he doesn't understand, toward her. As secrets stir and emotions ignite, can a broken heart find healing in the most unexpected soul? Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Angry Heart. She doesn't envision coming back here. She doesn't want to be here. But she has to be. It's her father's funeral after all. She doesn't want to be here. Actually, right now Leah would take anything over being here, which, considering that she had done 18 hours of labor with no drugs, was really saying something. Fecking Rebecca all that hippie do it natural crap. Too much sun, but she's here and she said she would come. Seth was the one that asked her. She put the phone down on her mother and then Seth rang her in tears and begged her to come, said he was scared, that he needed her, and Leah had not been able to turn Seth away when he had used that tone of voice. Not her silly little brother who had picked her up from the airport, hit with one of the worst growth spurts she had ever seen and who had looked small and large all at the same time. And that was before he saw her, or more importantly who she was with. She had gone to Rebecca's when she had left La Push. She had not given an explanation other than what was obvious. She had gone because her fiancé had ran off with her cousin and both her parents had seemed fine with it. Hell, her mom was even helping with the arrangements. She had not been able to stay after that, and she had taken her depleted college fund, packed a bag and left one morning and not looked back. She had gotten out, gotten to the plane, gotten to Hawaii, and there Rebecca Black had opened the door and opened several wine bottles and had helped Leah get through her grief and her anger. Rebecca had only told her father that Leah was with them, and then she had not told him anymore, which was good because Leah had then just found out after 3 months of not bleeding that at the tender age of 19 Sam had done the unthinkable, strung her along, dumped her, cheated on her with her cousin, and God only knows in what order, and then gotten her pregnant. She had stared at that stick in a state of utter disbelief for a very long time. The easiest thing to do was to get rid of it, but Leah had never been a woman brought up to do that. Granted, she was pro-choice, but at the same time she had wanted children with Sam so much she had been ready to give up most of her life to do it. And now that she was pregnant, she knew that it was going to be so much worse because she was alone. So yes, perhaps the easiest thing that she should have done was get rid of the baby, maybe the easiest thing all round for her and for Sam. Carefully, she did not think too much of that. She tended to get an almost shaky kind of rage when she thought about Sam. But at the same time she wanted to be a mother. She had spent a long time in Rebecca's bathroom staring at herself in the mirror, and face down on the floor too, wondering just what it was about her that Sam didn't like, what it was that he liked in Emily that he never liked in her. The way he had handled things and her parents' reactions to it had opened up old wounds and insecurities and had taken chunks out of her that she was not sure she would get back. The more she laid awake in her borrowed bed, though, the more that she thought she could do this. She had some money saved up, not a lot but some. She could go to community college, she could take classes at night and work to get her degree and work her jobs to support herself. Rebecca and Solomon had both made it clear that she was more than welcome to stay in their house. They both traveled so much to work anyway, and this was Hawaii, and as much as she didn't like the sun, she was from Washington, she wasn't used to it. She did have to admit that it wasn't hard to get a place. Leah was a practical woman and she had grown up watching her mother cut out coupons and squeeze pennies out of dollar bills. And so while it was the most radical decision she had made, she knew she could do it. And she knew she could keep her baby, raise it, love it. That created its own problems. Sam was again another problem, a problem that she never seemed to be able to escape. Because there was no doubt in her mind that Sam was the father of this baby, and once she knew that, once she could accept that, that created a whole other bunch of problems, the main one being that she didn't want Sam back in her life. She didn't trust him, didn't want Emily, who had been her best friend, to take her baby. It might seem irrational, but she was hormonal and emotional, and so in her own head it made sense. If Emily could take her fiancé, then why couldn't she take her baby? Her parents had clearly decided that her side was the one to take. The elders had been in Sam's pocket even before his little disappearing act. What choice did she have but to guard this little secret to her chest and never let him back in? And the second that she thought about it, she felt bad. Because Leah knew she knew the issue that Sam had with his dad, she knew that the wounds cut deep, she knew that it had plagued him for a long time, knew that despite the bubble wrap Dorothy had wrapped him up in, there was always going to be the question of why his dad had not thought he was good enough to stick around with. Now, while a part of Leah did take an immense petty pleasure in making Sam feel the same way she felt when he had chosen Emily over her, she didn't want to hurt this little thing growing inside of her, this little human that was slowly taking her over inside out. Twice she picked up the phone and debated calling him, and then she put the phone down. Quite frankly, Rebecca was right. Sam had made his bed, it was time for him to lie in it. With Emily, if that was what he had chosen. Leah had to focus on Leah and her baby, so she squared her shoulders and built a life for herself, and when she had been walking down the beach and her water had broke, she had gone to hospital for what could only have been described as an intense 18-hour labor. There were several other words that she could have used to describe it, but none of them were very polite, and at the end of it there had been her darling treasure that had been her baby boy. Born with her eyes and a tuft of dark hair on the 9th of April. Ironically, not that she was supposed to know this, but it was the exact same day that Jacob Black found his way around her ex-boyfriend's gag order. She had held him close and looked at his bright eyes and cried more than she cared to admit. Jude Anthony Clearwater was born happy and healthy and whole and quickly, because the only man Leah cared about. He was a good baby, a happy baby, and fell asleep in the second night, scaring her to death, she might add, and she found that she adapted well to motherhood in a way she had really not anticipated she would. She went with Jude because she liked the name, and though she didn't want to admit it, Rebecca had told her point blank that even she thought Joshua was a bit too cruel. She spoke to Seth sporadically but never mentioned him, simply because her brother leaked like a bucket with a hole in it. So when Seth called her one spring afternoon where she had been sat watching her son kick his little feet about and smile, that little smile that made her melt when she picked up his stuffed dolphin, she had not been expecting the news that her father had had a heart attack and that he was dead. And that was how she ended up back here. She had not wanted to bring Jude, but Rebecca and Solomon were on a 6-month tour with his surfing company, and she'd not had the option of childcare for the week it was going to take her to but her father to rest. Besides, it made no difference to her, she told herself. She was Jude's mother, she was the only parent on the birth certificate, and Sam could huff and puff and do another little disappearing act before she let him take her baby. Hawaii was a very different place to the mainland, and as cruel as it sounded, Sam did not have options for a long custody battle with her. She told herself that as she got off the plane and caught sight of her brother's face. Seth took off his sunglasses, his mouth open. Had it not been for his red-rimmed eye, she would have found the whole thing amusing. "Oh. Fucking hell, Leah," he said, taking in Jude. "What the hell have you done?" Leah rolled her eyes. "Thank God for Starbucks." "Wow," Seth said after inhaling 2 muffins and stirring far too much sugar into his coffee for her liking. "I mean, wow." "Yeah," she said, passing Jude his little pacifier. "I don't know, wow." "Seth, can you say something else, please?" "Like what?" "I don't know, how's Mom?" The second she said it, she hated herself for it. She didn't know why she cared about her mother all of a sudden, but here she was asking the question when it was clear that her mother had not tried to find a way to speak to her. Granted, Leah was not sure what she would have said, but that was by the by. She's gutted not saying much. She's had support. Emily's been handling. He trailed off at the look on her face. "Don't," he said flatly. "Don't go there and start a fight, please, Leah. I mean, you're right, but not before Dad's funeral." He looked so tired that her heart broke for him. "Are you sleeping?" Seth shot her a look and then. "No." "School been okay?" "Sam's spoken to them." "Why?" Seth opened his mouth and then. "There's a lot you've missed in the past year and a half," he said quietly. Sam's now being fast-tracked to elder. She very carefully didn't choke on her bagel. Instead, she turned to Jude, and for a second Seth followed her. "Leah, I get why you didn't tell anyone, but do you really think bringing him here is going to help? Sam is going to want to see his son." "I wanted to marry Sam," she said tartly. "We all don't get what we want in life, Seth." Seth nodded and then. "Can I hold him?" Leah brightened at that, and she unhooked Jude from his high chair and passed him to Seth, who held him with a slightly alarmed expression as if he was the cartoon in The Lion King. For a second he stared at him and Jude stared back, and then. "Is he having fun?" Leah rolled her eyes and gently arranged it so that Seth was holding him correctly. Seth, still looking terrified, stuck his tongue out, and he visibly relaxed when Jude batted his hands at him. "Seth? When did you get a tattoo? Consider it my teenage rebellion." "Aha." There was a pause and then. "There's something else you should know." "Oh God." Joshua Yulee had another son. Leah stared at him for a second and then. Is it that friend of Jacob Black's? I don't remember his name. Edmund Embry, but I am going to tell him you said that, Seth said, grinning. Yeah, he's never wanted to know, but then certain things developed between him and Jacob and Sam, and it's clear now Sam's his half-brother. Push the wedding back a bit. It was said mildly, but Leah caught the undercurrent of smugness in her brother's tone, and her love for her silly little baby brother was increased tenfold. Well, she said, fishing out her wallet. I say we have another muffin to celebrate that. Seth's smile was almost as wide as his nephew's. She had stayed at a hotel, well, the closest that you could get for La Push, which was outside the reservation. She honestly didn't think that she would be able to see her mother before the funeral. She had not even wanted to take Jude, but miraculously her baby boy slept on her lap all the way to the burial, and she stepped out seeing Seth stood by the car with their mother, and she swallowed, hugging her son closer. She wished now in hindsight that she'd had the sense to cover his head, but that would get him to fuss unnecessarily. For a second she felt her mother's eyes on her, and then, "Fuck me," Leah sighed. "Hello, Paul," she said, turning to face Sam's right-hand man. "Hello?" Paul said, looking at her with wide eyes. In a pair of second-hand slacks and a blue shirt he looked semi-decent. She shot him a tired look. "Hello?" Paul said again, raising his eyebrows to the heavens. She disappears, comes back with a baby, and all she can say is hello. "What do you want, Paul?" "Nothing. I came over to say hi." "Leah, don't be a bitch about it." "Why am I always the bitch?" Paul shot her a look that tinged for him just on the edge of sympathy. There was a pause, and then, "It's Sam's baby, isn't it?" "He's my baby, Paul." "Aha," Paul said in a deeply skeptical tone. "Keep telling yourself that, sweetheart." She was about to open her mouth when, "Leah?" She turned. "Seth? Mom says she wants you to sit with her." She shifted Jude for a bit in her arms and looked out over the burial site. She knew she was getting looks. "I don't." "Leah, just please." "Okay, you can go right after this if you want to, but she needs this." Leah sighed. Is he coming?" "Course he's coming," Paul said flatly. He didn't obfuscate her, which she appreciated. "He's an important member of the tribe, and Emily helped your mom organize this. Of course they are coming." She sighed. In truth, she had known this. But still, she hoisted Jude up on her hip a little bit more and looked for the first time at the coffin that housed her father. Suddenly, for the first time, it seemed to hit her that it was her father in that box, and she felt her throat constrict. "It's not about me," she said to Paul. You tell him that if he makes a scene here, I will rip his throat out with my fingernails." Paul shot her an appraising kind of look, but he nodded nonetheless. Leah squared her shoulders and took sight of her mom standing there watching her. Show time. She knew the second Sam turned up because of the hushed whispers. Her mom had barely been able to say anything, had looked from Jude to the coffin to Leah and Seth and back again, and then her entire body had seemed to tremble. Leah had wanted to reach out and touch her, but she knew her arms were full of baby, and besides, what good would it do? Charlie Swan, looking miserable, showed her where to sit and then gruffly, "You got a damn pretty one there, Leah." "Thank you," she said, hoisting him closer. Charlie nodded and went to sit with Billy. She knew the second Sam and Emily turned up because she had just arranged Jude on her lap when he and Emily, holding hands, turned up. Sam's eye swept down the length of the mourners, and then he stopped dead when he saw her and Jude on her lap. Emily looked at her too, but Leah didn't look at either one of them. She turned to Seth, who was glowering. "You all right?" "Yeah, I know what he's thinking," Seth said back grimly. The veins in his forehead were sticking out and his hands were shaking, and she reached out to touch him. She had thought that it was the heat the other day that had made him so hot, but now she could feel his skin. "Are you sick?" "No." "Why?" "Seth, you're like 100 degrees. "I know, I just not now." Leah opened her mouth, but then there was a cough and she saw Sam take his seat. For 1 second she broke the cardinal rule, and she looked at him and saw that his eyes were fixed on Jude's. He must have known she was looking because he dragged his eyes back up to hers, and for a second she stared at him. Leah had thought that she had trained herself to feel nothing in the months that they had been apart, and she was pleased to see that actually, while the thud of pain was still there, the thud of love had gone. Jude fussed a little at the noise, and she dropped her gaze down and looked away, her hair covering her shoulder and his face. Something metal hit her hands and she turned. Seth had his eyes down, but in his hand, bumping against her own, were car keys. It was his car, the beat-up old one that he had kept together with string and a prayer most of the time. Seth didn't say anything for a second, but then as the music started he turned to look at her. "You're going to need them," was all he said. Leah nodded and took the car keys and sat there holding them in one hand and her son in the other, and watching as her father was laid to rest, all the while knowing that the confrontation she both wanted and wanted to avoid was coming. It was inevitable perhaps, But her heart was still angry, and that meant that she could delay. The funeral is over and Leah knows she has to run. At the beach she meets someone. And the rest, as they say, is history for him anyway. She waits until the funeral is over before she stands up. In an ideal world she would greet mourners, but this is not an ideal world. Her brother next to her wipes a hand down his face. "Fuck," he says finally, and Leah turned and nudges his shoulder. For all that Seth doesn't look it, he is 15 and it's showing. Seth doesn't say anything for a second and then he rests his head on her shoulder for a second, the only weakness that her little brother, boy eroded into man, will ever show. "Yeah," she says, rubbing his shoulder as best she could. "I didn't think, I thought that this would be the easy bit," Seth muttered, wiping his face. "I know," she said again, and it felt terribly inadequate. "Leah?" She turned. "Hello, Mom." Her mother, always the strong dominant presence in her life, seemed almost silent with grief. Her eyes were red and her hair unwashed, it was plain to see. She opened her mouth and then closed it as if she was trying to find words. Leah waited. Grief or no grief, she knew her mother well enough to know that the words were going to come sooner rather than later. I didn't think to see you." A part of her wanted to snap at the woman, ask if she really did think that she wouldn't go to the man's funeral, the funeral of her father, but then she thought that actually she had debated herself whether or not she wanted to go, and she was holding a baby whose afternoon nap was soon going to be over, and she was not ready for who was waiting to have this conversation with her. "I didn't know if you would want me here," she said honestly. "Not the funeral, I meant the house," and she trailed off at the look on her mother's face, and she nipped her lip before she decided to try again. "I just thought that maybe you would. I always want you to come home, Leah," her mom said quietly. "I know that you blame me, Aunt Sue." Leah sighed. Seriously, could that fucking woman not read the room? Emily? Leah carefully took one step backwards. Seth moved closer so it didn't look coordinated. Leah had never loved him more. "People are wondering whether you are going to go back to the house. Should I tell them?" "Yes," her mom said with that small smile that was reserved for Leah's home-wrecking cousin, once best friend. "Thank you, dear. I'll be along." Leah shifted a little and Jude gave a little whimper. Emily's eyes went south, but Leah didn't look at her. She gently shifted so she could see the dark eyes awakening after the nap and smiled and got that soft-eyed look in return which she thought was her son, recognizing that she, Leah, here, was his mother and not this other woman with the scars and the grabby hand standing next to her that had taken everything else. "Leah." She looked up to see her mom staring at her and she watched the dark eyes flicker downwards as if she was trying to see past the blanket to the baby wrapped up underneath it. Leah forced a smile and cursed that Rebecca actually had a life. "I guess I'll see you around, Mom." This was sad, I suppose. Good luck with the wedding. It was the best she could do, and the gods, hers and the rest of them, would have to judge her on how bitchy it was. She turned around and then, "You're leaving?" "I didn't plan on staying, Mom. I don't have a home here anymore." It wasn't meant to be cruel, and maybe that was the tragedy of the entire thing. It was not meant to be as bitchy as it sounded, and yet she could not help herself. There was no scenario, none, where she found that she was able to speak freely about this, but it was the truth. La Push was not her home anymore. She had been prodded and poked out and indeed had ran before she was pushed. But the truth was she had never envisioned coming back here. She had never envisioned telling her mother that she had a child. What that said about their relationship she really could not say. Her mom took a step back as if Leah had decked her and she sighed, heaving Jude up against her hip. He was still too small enough to do anything, but his eyes were open now and he was looking around the place as if he was excited to see new things and new people. She didn't know what this world looked like to him, what La Push, the home of his ancestors, looked like to him. "I should go," she said awkwardly. She was achingly aware that Emily was there watching her, and she heaved her son over onto her other hip, wincing at the weight of him, and then, "I'd say it was good to see you, Mother, but it's not so," and she took another step back and then, "You're kidding, right?" That was Emily and she sounded unimpressed. Leah paused. For all the world she would smack this bitch around the face, but this was the father's funeral and she was holding a baby, so instead she turned and looked at her. "You are so lucky I have this child in my arms right now," she said flatly. Emily's eyes widened a little and then, "I didn't mean surely we have to discuss. Sam will be back here and I thought maybe I mean we have to talk about this going forwards, don't we?" "No," Leah said, and then, "It has nothing to do with Sam. I have nothing to do with Sam and this baby doesn't. It's not even his." Seth raised one eyebrow and said nothing. She didn't have to know that the lie would hold for about 10 seconds. As much as she didn't want to admit it, there was a reality that involved Sam and her son, and it was clear to see even if you didn't want to. For a long moment they stared at each other and then, "Leah? Shit." She closed her eyes once and then Seth had migrated to the other side of her. For a second Seth stared down the man who he had once been as close to as a brother, and Leah, looking at them, wondered when the growth spurt had hit her brother so hard that he was able to do that. Sam looked at Seth and then at her, and she took another step backwards, and then she gave up on all the protests and pretense and then turned around and walked back to the car keys, making it light up, and then she paused. There was a car seat there. The thought that Seth had known that this was coming and had done what he had to do to protect her was enough to make her almost cry. Her little brother had gone out and gotten a car seat so she could put her son in it and get him to safety away from the conversations that she did not want. She could not shake the fear that Sam, already the youngest member of the council ever, would use what influence he had to keep her son here. Res politics and the politics of the outside world were very different, and never had it been more clear as it had been here. She put Jude in the car and passed him his stuffed giraffe, and then slammed the door shut and turned and, "Fuck's sake, Sam, don't do that." He was there watching her right next to her, and she felt her heart thud with fear. The only thing between their son and him was her, and she was not going to back down. She was not losing Jude because Sam wanted to have his cake and eat it. "Take a step backward," she said through gritted teeth. "This is my father's fucking funeral. You are not gonna make a scene here." Sam watched her body shuddering once for a second as if he was going to be sick, and then he took a breath and then another and then a step backwards. She watched him for a second and then, "What the fuck do you want? Is that my baby?" "No, Leah, please, we both know he is." "Who said it was a boy?" His eyes glinted for a second, and she hated that she had given him that power. "So it's true then," he said flatly. "I have a son." "You don't have anything," she said flatly. "I have a son, you have Emily. You made that choice and that bed, and quite frankly I hope you're happy lying in it, because as far as I am concerned you're done." And with that she pushed past him and got into the driver's seat, and she slammed the door. It took Sam 2 seconds to respond, and his hand slammed onto the glass, and then she sighed. She had known that this was going to happen, and now what? Was she even okay to go to Hawaii? Was she even able to go home? She rolled down her window. She shouldn't have, but she was Leah Clearwater, and she had never been able to resist having the last word. "What? You can't just take him." "Watch me, Sam. He's my son." "No, he's not," she said flatly. "And you're not gonna do a damn thing about it, Sam, because that's not the kind of man you are, as history has so often told. You like it when people discover what you are." She let the insult hang magnificently, she thought, because it was true. When she had found out that Emily was back, she had gone to see her and had not expected her to be necking her ex-fiancé when she had walked in, and from the flush on his face it was clear that he remembered that nightmare too. Good. She looked at him once and wondered how she could have loved someone like that. "Goodbye, Sam. Have a wonderful marriage." And with that she rolled the car out of the car park and drove off, hands shaking. She had been sat at the beach for an hour. She had wanted to drive out of town, but Jude had been fussy and her phone had been ringing. She had wanted to respond to Seth, to her baby brother, and she had wanted to assure him that he was not at fault for this, but at the same time she was terrified that he was going to be forced to do something. She didn't know what had happened to Sam, and she didn't know what had happened to Seth, but Leah knew bad news when she saw it, and that was all this place had ever been. Bad news from the start, but the beach had always been nice. And her dad was dead. And her son was crying. She took Jude down to the beach and she pulled off his little shoes and let him splash around. Jude went from fussy baby to absolutely delighted by the sight of stones and water. Beaches in Hawaii were as common as coffee shops in New York, and her baby had been a water baby from the get-go. This was a very different beach than the one that he been used to, and it was clear that it was blowing her baby boy's mind. She laughed and bent down with him, splashing the water and laughing, passing him stones and then throwing with him and making a big deal out of each tiny splash. Jude was happy again, and she knew that once more she had to take him from this happy day, the only bit of her home that he would realize. Maybe it was a bad thing, Sam notwithstanding. He could go hang for all she cared, but she knew that society wanted her people erased. They had been pushed and marginalized throughout history, and they had lucked out with Charlie as sheriff, but the truth was, if Leah had gone missing, which in all terms she had, and she had not called Rebecca to tell her mom where she was, she knew the feds would not have bothered to look for her. They had been the first people to walk this country, to walk this land, and they had been killed, spat on, torn from their parents, dragged kicking and screaming into wars they didn't want, had their language took from them, their past, their future, denied rights, had their culture erased, and their history not taught in schools, and what for? She was achingly aware that her own grandmother had been sent to those schools in the South, the Indian schools, and her grandmother had never seen her parents again. That her grandfather had lost his brother because they had never bothered to send in doctors. That if she had been born 3 decades ago, her life would have been a very different story. She knew that, and now sat on the beach with her son. She had to concede that it was a catch-22. Running from Sam was one thing. Running from Jude's heritage was another. But she couldn't stay here, could she? How was she supposed to spend her life here? There wasn't options here, not many of them anyway. It's why so many stayed in the same cycle, and so many of the new kids tried like hell to get out. Even if she thought she could put up with Sam, with Dorothy, with her mother, there was no way that she could build a life here. Hawaii had its fair share of problems, but it had healthcare, and it had a future, and it had friends. Here she had nobody. She could hear it now, Sam's ex back with a baby, taking the baby away from him, and oh poor Sam, and fucking Emily. She threw a stone into the lake and sighed, wiping her eyes on the back of her thumb. Always the villain here. Leah Clearwater, the woman who showed up and disrupted Sam and Emily's happiness. Never mind that she was deserving happiness of her own. She was just the bitch who didn't understand that love was love. Wasn't that how her mother had put it? She groaned, and Jude turned to look at her. She smiled and passed him his pacifier, and he let her slip it into his mouth before she picked him up. "One more stone, okay?" she said, and he threw the thing with a little plop. She watched the ripples for a second and then, "Back to a real beach soon," she said quietly, and then she hooked him on her hip and turned. There was someone else on the beach. For one endless horrific moment she thought that it was Sam. She thought that he was here to take Jude from her, and she stared at him in utter terror, but then he came into view and she realized that it was not Sam. It was Embry? She had only seen Embry once, and that had been with Jacob Black at some kind of shitty bonfire, but she had seen enough to know that he and Sam had looked alike. Now that their hair was cut, she thought it was glaringly obvious that they were brothers, and she noted with a bitchy kind of glee that the resemblance they shared was so their father. That would drive Sam mad, she thought, grinning. She hooked her son on her hip and went to move past him, but as she did, her ankle caught on one of the rocks and she fell. She tried to make it so that she was able to shield Jude with her body, but before she could, she was caught and dragged upwards. For a second she stared at Sam's brother who had helped her, and she noticed, well, he had very nice eyes. Dark brown, the chocolate, but one was flecked with gold, and she straightened as his hands came around her, and she had an odd pulse of desire that she wanted them around her forevermore. She noticed that he had the same angular cheekbones that his half-brother did, but there was a softness about them rather than a bitterness. He was softer in general, and his hair was jet black, mused on top of his head with slanted softness. Him, for the most part, was staring at her in a very odd way. It was almost like love. "Clearwater, get a grip." "Sorry," she said, straightening. "I didn't mean to, thank you." She ran a hand down Jude's nose, but he was still sucking on his pacifier and didn't seem to realize how close Mama had come to face planting the rocks. "Thanks," she said, smiling again, but he was still staring at her. "You're welcome," he said softly, and his eyes were still roaming her face. "You're Embry, right?" she asked, looking away. It was part preservation and part to make sure she didn't do anything that embarrassing again. "Yes." "And you're Leah?" "Yeah," she said, turning back to look at him. A smile was now tugging at his lips, as if he thought something had happened that made this amusing. "What?" "Nothing," he said quietly. This is really not how I saw today going." She opened her mouth, but then she saw out of the corner of her mouth Sam in the distance. He had known that she was coming here obviously, and she knew that it was him. "It's not Sam," Embry said, following her gaze and correcting her. "That's Jared." "But he's here for Sam is my guess." "Why?" "Well, you're the one with the baby on your hip, Leah, you tell me." "They don't want me to leave here. He wants to take my son." Embry watched her for a second and then he held out his hand. "Come with me," he said urgently. "What are you going to do?" "I got a place I can take you." Leah looked at him. "What place?" "Jake, Quill and we got this little space we go to. None of the guys know about it. Trust me. It's safe." It was madness to trust him, but there was something about him that made her pause. She stared at him and then she took his hand, and before Jared could climb over the broken fencing that led to the beach, they were gone into the shadows of the trees, Jude chewing a piece of her hair and Leah wondering just what the hell she had, again, gotten herself into this time. Embry's life is not what you would call good at the moment. Half-brother, werewolf, council looking at him funny, Harry's funeral, a lack of trust, Bella Swan, and then down by the beach he finds his childhood crush with a baby on her hip, and the rest, as they say, is history. Embry was not having a very good day. Scratch that, Embry was not having a very good year. Actually, fuck that, Embry was not having a very good life. And it was all Joshua Ull's fault. He had no issue in saying this as it stands, but the reality was that Joshua Ull probably didn't care that he had screwed up Embry's life, and so that left Sam as the one person that Embry wanted to take it out on. That would have been fine, he could have been fine dealing in his irrationality, but the truth was that Sam seemed to think he was the injured party in all of this, which was in Embry's point of view borderline laughable. Sam had always known who his father was, had known straight from the off that he was a deadbeat of epic proportions, had known that there was a possibility of him having a half-brother the same way Jacob had known. It had increased tenfold when Embry had become a wolf, and he'd still banned him from asking the question. To go home and tell his mother, his silly erratic harebrained mother who was stronger than anyone thought she was, who had put up with more shit from this town than she deserved and who'd had him at 16, what was going on. Sam had bullshitted his way through it being a secret, but considering Bella Swan knew, there was no reason why he shouldn't tell his mother, and to his great amusement he had found that he could. Half a bottle of white wine later he knew why he had been able to get around Sam's gag order, why in his own way Jacob had. Grandson of the last alpha half-brother to the current one. Typical. Never let it be said though that the man was blamed solely for this infraction. Embry had snapped at one bonfire and pointedly told Sue Clearwater that his mother had been a 16-year-old girl not even out of high school, and Josh Ulley had been married, 25 and with a son, so perspective might be in order. Clearly either not used to be called on out on her moral high ground or clearly not seeing it that way, and he was willing to bet it had been the first. Sue had shut up, but her cheeks had flared red. Embry had copied his resting bitch face from his mother a long time ago, and he'd stared her down until he was sure she felt small, as his mother had done when Sue had called her a whore that time he'd been 6. When he'd thought that randomly on a Tuesday, Seth had gotten very upset, and while he had felt a little bit like a dick, it was bad when even Jacob was telling you that shit. He had to admit that he'd had fun. The only person who in his bizarre way understood was Paul. Paul, whose dad had run off when he was a kid and whose mom had never been around much, or sober much if truth be told. Paul, who in his own unique way, loyal to Sam as he was able to tell Sam to shut it when the bollocking got too loud. Paul, who he knew through Quill, had told Sam emphatically that he had a half-brother and he had to deal with it because even they knew that there was something magical going on in Seattle and not the good kind, and the Cullens being back was never going to lead to anything good no matter what Bella Swan promised. Christ, if it wasn't for what he saw through Jacob's head, Embry would hate her on principle. However, he was too filled with hatred for others, and when he saw Edward and Bella's relationship through Jacob's lens, he could not help but feel sick at the sight of it. He thought coercive control was at the very least what was happening, and Embry was an old-fashioned man who thought scum was scum and there was only so much you could blame for historical purposes. After all, he was part of a race that had been all but annihilated for historical purposes, and God knows it was not like the federal government was trying to lift a finger to compensate them now, was it? But back to his original point, he was not having a good day. He had not gone to the funeral. Seth, to his credit, had asked them all, but he'd begged off. Sam had said nothing, but to be honest, Embry thought Sam had a bit more to be preoccupied with rather than his attendance. He had claimed that he was still raw and unsure of his transformation, and Seth, reading through the lies and the lines, had nodded and gracefully accepted. The truth was he didn't want to be near the insidious, well, that was Sue Clearwater. Even if he would pay to watch Sam attempt to deal with the return of Leah. Love Emily he did, because how could you not when she cooked so good, but half the pack was secretly dying to see what would happen when the three of them came face to face. Hell, even Jacob had placed down a bet on the action. He'd gone to the beach instead to think, to try not to feel, and to remember that when he was human his thoughts were safe. Here and only here was he able to think of his escape. He was getting out of this shithole of a life if it killed him, and if he could, he was taking his mother with him. Paul and Jared might have deferred college for a year, but he was not going to. And he was not going to look local. He was gone, and he was never going to come back. Joshua Ulley had his son in Sam, and seeing as Jacob was more of a brother than his actual brother, Embry was very happy to leave it there in the past like the pile of werewolf crap that it was. He had been thinking on this when she'd arrived. Firstly, the beach was never inhabited, and today he had not been expecting anyone. His mother had not bothered to show up for the funeral, but other than her he knew half of La Push would come out to see Harry off. This was a big thing, this was a massive thing that grew into tributes and everything. Everyone was going to be here. Hell, he was surprised the local high school had not closed down, business were shut and everything, but at the same time he was sat on the beach watching as a woman with a baby got out of what he was sure was Seth's ratty old car and sit on the sand. It took him a second to realize who she was. And then, holy shit, it was Leah. Leah fucking Clearwater. Suddenly Embry felt a very strong urge to go home and wash and comb his hair. It was Leah. Leah had been, well, you have to understand. Leah had been one of the girls that she'd been the only girl. She had been kind to him when nobody else had wanted to bother with him, she'd accepted him when nobody else had wanted to. She'd been the prettiest girl that ever Embry did see, and he was not ashamed to admit to anyone, except Seth, that she'd been the first woman he'd thought of with his hand. Well, you know, it had been one of the dreams that he had never considered. Leah had been with Sam and everyone had said that she was going to be married to him, that Sam was waiting for the right moment to propose. And then it had all gone to shit when Sam had disappeared for 3 days, come back and dumped her. Even then, when Leah had been with him, he'd been imprinting on Emily. And granted, now that he knew the story behind the whole tragedy, he had accepted that Sam had not asked for it, but from the outside looking in, it had seemed exceptionally harsh. And while Sue had learnt the full story, she had not bothered to tell her daughter, which when his own mother had found out about, she had shot Sue a look that made vampires less frightening. Not that they were, according to Jacob, but still. Anyhow, there was Leah, baby on her hip, dark hair swinging over her shoulder, and walking down the beach. She had upped and left one day when the dust had settled on Sam and Emily's engagement, and she'd not come back. Embry had not registered that she had come back anyway. She'd slipped off like a thief in the night, but she'd taken the shine of the golden couple. It was clear that in her act she'd sent gossip spiraling on the entire family. On the relationship, sent it clear through the secret that they were trying so badly to hide. He turned and walked down the beach, and then she turned and tripped on a rock. He was there quicker than any human should have been. He caught her, and then she looked up and, "Sorry," she said, straightening. "I didn't mean to, thank you." She turned back to her son, but Embry had not registered he was gone. She was perfect. She was utterly perfect, perfection in the extreme. She had dark hair that fell down past her shoulders and big brown eyes the color of a melted kind of dark chocolate. She had softer cheekbones and features than she had done before. Her body was slender, but there was a mouth-watering curviness to her that must have come with childbirth. Embry, who was not what one would call a romantic, suddenly found that he would do anything for her, be anything for her, that he would burn down this fucking reservation for her if she asked him to, and that, oh shit, he knew what this was. He had imprinted on Leah Clearwater, his half-brother's ex. It was a good thing, really, that Embry had a sense of irony. It really was. Some fucking warrior spirit up there was having a great laugh with this shit, he was sure of it. He opened his mouth and then closed it, dragging his eyes to the baby. He too had his mama's dark hair, but it was also clear looking at him that he was Sam's son. He was perfect, but he was Sam's son, and suddenly the pieces of the puzzle were coming together. It was clear now why she had left. It was a magnificently bitchy thing to do to Sam, who had issues around abandonment, but at the same time it was so wonderfully bitchy he wanted to snigger. Sam got Emily. Leah got their son. Looking at the cute little boy, Embry, as much as he liked Emily, thought that Leah had won the battle. God knows if she was going to win the war though, but he would help her, he would do anything for her, he would. Right now she was his whole fucking world. Thanks, she said, smiling again, but he was still staring at her. You're welcome, he said softly, and his eyes were still roaming her face. He found that he never wanted to stop looking at her for as long as he lived. Thank God, right now he lived forever, right? You're Embry, right? Yes. And you're Leah. Yeah, she said, turning back to look at him. He could not help but smile. Even before this imprinting shit, he'd been consumed with thoughts of her. Now in the space of a year he had a half-brother, a werewolf counterpart, and, God willing, an imprint and stepson. It really was a great thing that Embry got irony. And that he had inherited his mother's temper rather than his father. At least with his mother there was a shot of getting her, the baby, and himself out of here. But he was jumping ahead. What? Nothing, he said quietly. This is really not how I saw today going. She opened her mouth to speak, but then she stopped. Embry followed her gaze, hackles raised, and he saw standing there Jared. He knew Jared had been at the funeral. Knew Sam too had been unable to leave, or would have been, and he could only get Jared was there to fiddle with the car to stop her leaving. She obviously knew that too, because she tightened her hand on her baby. Embry wondered if she'd known that this would happen, Sam was going to want access to his son. Embry knew that, and even he knew that it was going to be more complicated than simply going to court. Sam was not going to do that, even if he did. Historically speaking, in federal courtrooms their people didn't do well. And Embry knew from conversations with his mother that the courts generally favored the mother, but he could keep her here. Great, Embry could see the patrols now. Like Bella fucking Swan all over again. Well, not on his watch it wasn't. It's not Sam, Embry said, following her gaze and correcting her. That's Jared. But he's here for Sam is my guess. Why? Well, you're the one with the baby on your hip, Leah, you tell me. They don't want me to leave here. He wants to take my son. Embry watched her for a second and then he held out his hand. Come with me, he said urgently. What are you going to do? I got a place I can take you? Leah looked at him. What place? Jake, Quill and we got this little space we go to. None of the guys know about it. Trust me. It's safe. Maybe it was madness for her to trust him and she shouldn't have, but for reasons he didn't understand, but was thankful for, she did, and so he turned and helped her into the forest before Jared could even scramble down the beach, and he knew that he could get her somewhere safe, where his scent would be disguised for a while, and that in that moment that was all that mattered. Leah and Embry talk about the past, the present and the future. Leah makes some decisions. She was laughing. She could not remember the last time that she had laughed, and certainly not this much. So she said, wiping her eyes on the back of her hand. So then what happened? What do you mean what happened? I jumped off the cliff. She giggled again. Jude was sat resting against Embry's chest asleep. He had been fussing and he had offered to hold him, and then even though she was loath to do so, she had to admit that seeing this boy, well, not really a boy at this point was he. This man, holding her son, was doing things for her with caps lock all across the board. She found that she liked him. She didn't naturally trust strangers, but she thought that she was liking this one. She liked Sam's brother more than she liked Sam. Admittedly, that was not a hard thing right now, but there was an ease with Embry that kept her going even through the fear that Sam was going to come out of the trees and find her. Jude waved his fat little fist around and she sighed. She held out her hands and Embry pouted before turning to look at Jude, who looked back up at him completely at ease with this strange. That was another odd thing, she thought. She was not used to her son being at ease with a stranger the way he was with Embry. Hell, it had taken him time to get used to Rebecca. But yet here he was in La Push for 2 days and he had managed to get used to Seth and now Sam's half-brother. What that meant for her relationship with Sam, she really couldn't think. She sighed as Embry looked down at her son. Mama's boy, and I hope he never forgets it, she sang into the air. Embry laughed and leaned back against the tree. So she said as Jude cuddled in close. Dare I ask how it's been? What, Sam? She shrugged. Embry shrugged too. About the same as you'd expect, he said honestly. I think I always knew that it was him. I mean, it's not what I wanted. In an ideal world I'd have preferred it to be Billy, to be honest. Just cause I know him and I know that Jacob wouldn't give a shit. Not really Sam's, I mean his Sam, you know. It would be fine if he would just cut my mom a bit of slack. He's not. Embry shrugged and Leah took that to mean a no. It wasn't surprising, really. On one sense she could understand it. Sam was such a mama's boy himself that it was almost laughable. It wouldn't have mattered if Embry's mom had been held down and forced. All that would have mattered. The initial knee-jerk reaction would have been that his mom had been cheated on. And then there was the secondary reaction, which was that she too was raising a little boy just like Sam had been, who she was hoping would turn out to be a completely mama's boy herself. And that led her back to the current problem. She had seen how the lack of fatherhood figures in his life had aged Sam somewhat. He had been pitied, frowned upon, and judged just as much as Embry had for the same thing. Modernization came slowly on Arez, and often when a large generation of the elders died out. Sometimes she had to admit that she was sympathetic to him. Other times she wanted to kill him. God, it was all such a mess. So Embry said finally. Jude's my nephew, huh? You figure that out, have you? Not stupid, Leah, he said, and the casual tone of her voice made her shiver. She wanted to drink him in and, well, other things that were highly inappropriate. In her defense, she was a single mother of a baby. She'd lost a great deal of time and composure a long time ago. Even if she had good wank bank material, of which Embry certainly was, she barely had enough time in the morning to brush her teeth, never mind doing anything else. Even now at this point she had to concede that having a shower alone was a special treat. Yes, she said, finally aware that he was awaiting an answer. Yeah, he is. He nodded. And what's the plan then? He asked causally. I assume that you weren't planning on telling Sam he existed before your father died? With anyone else it would have been an accusation. With Embry it came out more like general curiosity. No, she said, compelled to be honest. But to be fair, I didn't have a plan. When I left here I wasn't sure if I was pregnant. It wasn't obvious until I got to Hawaii. When I left I just wanted to get away from them. I think I was thinking I might come back, but when I found out that I was pregnant things would change. I knew that things would change, she amended. Brown eyebrows furrowed together. What do you mean? She shrugged. I still feel that Sam will take him away from me. I think he will get custody of him and then he and Emily will raise him, and I think that there are certain people on the res that will help him. This is a power structure, and from the start Sam has been set up to be the next chief. Embry let out a maniacal kind of laugh, and when she looked at him feeling slightly affronted, she realized that his eyes were very warm. It's not that, he said, rightly taking her reaction to him making fun of her. Leah, you do get that nobody is gonna swoop in and take your son, right? Sam doesn't have half the power that you think he has. Hell, at this point Jacob probably has more. If you want to go down the chief route, then he is the one who is next in line. It's only because he doesn't want it that Sam is where he is today, trust me. And Jacob might love Sam like a brother right now, but he views him with some kind of distaste. Why? Bella Swan. Who the fuck? She trailed off as she tried to think about the name. A face came to her, but she wasn't sure. White face with clouds of dark hair, but that was it, and Embry nodded. She's a hot topic for Jacob, he said, and she got the sense that was something big and ugly and pulsating under a rock like a boil needing to be lanced there, but she wasn't sure. What I am trying to say, Embry said, his expression twisting from the dark amused look that he had been giving her, is that the law is still stacked against us. Sam is not gonna take him. He might want access, but he is not going to take him. Federal law still isn't kind to us, and you can stick your fingers up at tribal ones all you want. He's your son, and for whatever it's worth, I don't think Sam is going to put up that much of a fight. I know that he does in his own way feel bad about what happened. Is that supposed to make me feel better? I thought that it would make you feel better, he said easily. But what would I know? I'm the bastard son of the whore, remember? I never called her that. Your mom was kinda cool. She was the one that taught us all that thongs were sexy. Embry looked at her for a second, apparently too stunned to speak. Well, thanks for that, Leah, he said finally. That's just security that a boy can take to the bank. She laughed out loud then, and Jude made that odd little sound that she thought was him in his own way laughing too. Embry flushed a most delicious color, and then he picked at some of the grass and then, look, Sam and I have issues, we always will. I take my mother's side, he takes his, and that's fair enough, I suppose. He sees the woman who was abandoned to face down the humiliation of her peers, and I see the teenager who was groomed by an older married man and who was treated like the tribe pariah in two tribes, neither of whom wanted to admit that if they'd been a bit more lax things might have gone differently. And there's no way that my mom would have ever gotten an abortion. You know that up until the 90s they were still sterilizing women on Indian reservations for that. So she made the best of what she could do, and so did Sam's mom. I've always said if he wants to be civilized to mine, I'll be civilized to his. We're not there yet. Wouldn't mind too much, but Emily does cook and I need to eat. He shot Leah an odd look as if he was afraid that mentioning Emily would set her off, but Leah just raised an eyebrow. She didn't want to admit that he was right because he was. There was a truth to Emily being a good cook. God knows the woman was designed to be a perfect housewife. In an ideal world she'd have been popping out babies in the 30s and sending them off to the Catholic schools while she made apple pie and tried to fit in. She sighed and tapped her nails against her leg, and then, what else did you want to say? Only that I get what it's like to not have a father and then find out who he is about 16 years later, he said flatly. I wouldn't wish that on your boy, Leah. And to be fair, Sam gets it too, and I don't think he would wish that on his son either. He's going to get access. The question is not how you fight it, it's how you control it. What do you mean? You're the mom, he said as if it was obvious. And like Sam as they do, there is a cohort of individuals that like your parents too, and they know that they are in the wrong here too. You know, even people have been nice to my mother since the scandal broke. You're blindingly hot and you have a baby. Christ, half the women will want to defend you and half the men will want to be with you. The entire school is going to be feasting on this for months. Blindingly hot? He shrugged. I only speak the truth, he said, but he scooted forwards and his eyes were very warm and she felt her breath catch and then another one catch. She opened her mouth and she suddenly felt the urge to have him take her right there and then on the forest floor. She felt like she needed to be taken to the forest floor by him hard. She wanted to make it so that she could eat him, drink him, have his hands on her hips. She shook her head slowly. It was as if she was drunk. What the hell was wrong with her? She closed her eyes and then opened them again and she looked down at her son and then, so you think I should stay? I want you to stay, he said, and there was an edge of desperation that came with it that she didn't know what the hell she was going to do with. Oh, yeah, for Seth, for your mom, for the rest of them, he said, and for Jude. Look, Leah, take it from me, he's gonna ask you one day why you didn't include his dad in his life, and I don't know if he's gonna like your answer. It was the truth, and indeed it was so aligned to what she was thinking. I could stay a while, she said, looking down at her son, and so she missed the look of heartbreakingly rendered joy that was etched upon his face. Yeah? Yeah, I suppose. But I'm not making any promises. Embry grinned, showing off his perfect white teeth. Leah smiled back at him. Jude interrupted the moment by trying to stick his little baby hands in the dirt and then hit himself in the face with them. So what do I do now? You go make your entrance, Cinderella. You will go to the ball, he said, waving his hands around and causing her to laugh. You coming too? At once the smile was stripped off his face. I don't know if. Oh honey, that was not a rhetorical question. If I am going, then you are going, she said, and he watched her for a second before he smiled. She held out her hand and he took it, and she dragged him upwards as Jude squawked a little. She got him comfortable and watched out of the corner of his eye as he stuffed his hands in his pocket. He winked at her, though she noticed he looked nervous, and she smiled back at him even though she knew she was nervous, and together they walked out of the clearing and back out of the forest so they could find her car and go back to her mother's house and to where she was sure her father's wake was still in full swing. Leah goes back to her father's wake. Sam is there. She waits in the car for a second before she stares at the driveway. If she goes up that driveway, that's it. She knows what she is staring down, and she knows that it is not going to be pleasant. This little life that she has carved out for herself, that she thinks she has carved out for herself, is going to be forever altered, and she is genuinely not sure if she wants that. She doesn't know if she wants that to happen. She's worked so hard for happiness, and now it was on the verge of being taken away. Embry next to her watched her for a second and then, I can go in and check if it's just the well, whoever you want. You don't have to have this conversation in front of half the res. She laughed, trying to imagine her mother's reaction to sending everyone home so she and her ex and her cousin could hash out custody was almost funny. There was a pause and then, no, I can handle it. I am just gonna tell him the truth, that Jude is his son and that he is not having custody. He won't like that. I don't care. Believe me, Sam is not what I am worried about, he said, biting his lip for a second. Have you thought about access? I don't know, she said truthfully. I suppose he can have that. I don't want Jude to grow up without a father. I do know that. I want it in my terms, in my way, you know? Yeah, he said, nodding. I get that. And Sam, look, I might moan that he is a bastard, but the truth of the matter is that he knows what it's like to grow up without a father. He's not gonna want that for his son, and I think you have more people on your side than you want to admit. Oh? I'm on your side, he said with a smile, and then he opened the door before she could so much as smile back. And she wanted to, oh, she really, really did want to. There was something about Embry that made her want to smile back. She got out of the car, Jude hooked on her hip and dithered. No, I am not going in there with everyone. If he wants, he can come out and speak to me. I am not going in there to be the thing everyone stares at. If he wants to speak to me, he can get off his ass and sit on the grass like everyone else. Embry flashed her a grin and nodded. Embry? Yeah? Tell him to leave Emily indoors. My mother should find something for her to do. She didn't bother to hide her irritation on this one. She was done being polite as far as her mother and her ex-best friend were concerned. For once she was going to be the bitch that everyone suspected and whispered about. She hugged Jude a little bit closer and then, hey sis, Seth, you want me to take him? She eyed her brother for a second. Sorry, I ran off. Hey, I don't blame you, he said, perching himself on the hood of the car and somehow not sliding off. I am just glad that you are here in one piece. He looked sideways and then. Surprised you found Embry though, didn't think he was coming to this. He said he didn't want to. No, Seth said finally. He didn't. There was a pause and then. Leah, why is he trailed off and then. Listen, you know what, right now I don't care. Why don't you let me take Jude and then you can. Hello, Leah. There was a pause as she closed her eyes and reminded herself that this man had caused unspeakable hurt and suffering. She was not to fall into his arms like this, even though it would be easy to do so again. He had chosen someone else and she had cried enough tears over him. She was not interested in crying anymore. That was what she told herself anyway. Up to you if you believe it to be true. Either way, total disinterest was what he was selling. Hello, Sam, she said, opening her eyes again. She motioned to Seth, who, shooting Sam a filthy look, hooked Jude out of her arms. For a second, Seth and Sam looked at each other. Sam didn't say anything, just slid his eyes from Seth down to his son again and back up and then back to her. Embry said you wanted to talk. I didn't want to go in there and do it with everyone listening in, she said, and he nodded. Yeah, he said, and there was a flicker of an almost wry amusement on his face. Reckon we've done enough of that for one lifetime. She nodded and then, I am going to go and give you two. I don't know, Sam, so help me, I am watching. Seth stopped away and Sam watched him go and then, he used to love me like a brother, he said finally. I know he did. He really looked up to you. I used to have to tell him to go away so we could have privacy. Sam smiled. And now, he said, his voice tinged with bitterness, he won't look at me, keeps his temper in check barely, but he blames me for a lot of things. He sighed and then, I didn't know if you were coming back for this, Leah. You mean my father's funeral? Sam shrugged. I didn't know if you wanted. I didn't know you didn't. I mean, had you told, I would have asked if you wanted me to stay away. Wouldn't have made much of a difference if I had wanted to stay away. You'd have come. So would she. There was no mistaking who she was on about. Both Sam and Leah knew who she was. Hell, Leah thought, staring up at her house. She was on the porch watching them. Sam followed her gaze and frowned, but there was a look on his face that Leah knew he had never given to her. She swallowed. His name is Jude, she said quietly, and Sam's expression snapped back to her. And he's yours, yeah. Sam nodded slowly as if he was seeing events pass by his eyes on a screen. Why didn't you tell? Sam considered the end of that sentence very carefully. Right, yeah, sorry, I can see why you might not want to speak to me, but you just left, Leah. We didn't know if you were alive or dead, and then Jake got a call from his sister who wasn't very nice to say that you were up there, and then you didn't. Your mom has been going spare. I doubt it. Leah, don't do that, he said suddenly. You don't know what it's been like for her. I imagine Emily has managed to paper over the cracks. She spat before she could stop herself. And I didn't ask you out here so we could rehash all our delightful family history. I asked you out here because Embry made me realize that I had to face this, that I had to tell you that you were Jude's father. Embry? Yes, Embry, the one I met in the woods, your half-brother, remember? Sam shifted a little. You know? I'm not stupid, Sam. Reckoned out of the three it was always gonna be you. Billy Black can't keep a secret to save his life, and you'd have to be 3 sheets to the wind on a good day if you wanted. Quill, fuck me, your old man had it for young girls. You told me that yourself. What was the last girlfriend? 19? I think the last one was barely out of high school. Sam spat. He shook his head and then, I haven't handled that well either. No shit, Leah muttered. I bet your mother was thrilled. Sam shook his head. She still thinks that he's coming back, you know, he said, and there was a tinge of sadness in the voice. I can't. I thought that, Embry. I really thought that when it came out that he would be the one thing that made her realize what an animal he was, and yet he shook his head. Leah resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Dorothy Yulee had been a bootscrapper to both her husband and her son. There was no way she was ever going to hear a bad word about either, even though both had in their own way earned it and then some. Look, I would have been there, you know. Had you told me, I know you don't believe me, but I would have been there, and that would have involved me staying, she said flatly. Sam looked at her and frowned. You are staying, though? No, I am not, she said flatly. I have a life in Hawaii, Sam. I am intended to go back to it. This stopped being my home a long time ago. Leah, you have a family here. Sam, I really do not think you need to be lecturing me on family, she said flatly. I really do not think that is how you want this conversation to go. For a second Sam stared at her and then, you can't go back to Hawaii. You can't take him back to Hawaii with you. He can stay. Don't even fucking try it. Leah, he's my son. No, he's my son. You're just the sperm donor. Leah, Sam, you left me. And not just for another girl, but for my best friend, and my family. She was down for a fitting, for crying out loud. And then I don't know what it was about me that wasn't good enough, but I am not going to have you in and out of Jude's life like a yo-yo. I wasn't going to tell you, and if my dad hadn't have died I wouldn't have come back. I had made peace with the fact that your actions made me the exile. But here we are, you have no rights or a say in this situation. You are not on the birth certificate, and you and I both know no matter how fucked up this is, I am going to win if you take it court, because the courts don't like to admit that we exist. You try and stop me from leaving and I will call the police. She took a deep breath. Sam was shaking and she was now aware that Embry was on the porch next to Emily. Fuck. What I am offering, she said again in a controlled voice, is access. I am not saying no, Sam, which by the way is better than where I was this morning, trust me. What I am saying is that the door is not shut. You have to do this on my terms, and quite frankly I believe that I am owed that much by you and by her, don't you? For a second she couldn't get Emily's name out. Sam was shaking so violently that he was a blur, which was odd. He'd never been like this when she had been with him. And then just before she could ask just what the fuck was wrong with him, there was a sound of footsteps and she found her vision blocked by a tall body. By Embry's tall body. Sam, why don't you go and take a walk? Embry said in a tone that was light and friendly and yet tainted with something else. Sam gnashed his teeth together, and then Paul was there too. Sam, let's go take a walk, he said urgently. You cannot do this here at the funeral. Leah scoffed. Sam never had any problem doing what he wanted beforehand. She wouldn't have thought a funeral would stop him. Embry reached out behind her in an involuntary gesture as if he wanted to shove her further behind his body, and in which Sam had clocked. For a second the shaking stopped as he looked between the two of them, and then he stared at Embry for a second. Embry stared back at him, and some kind of look passed between the two of them, and then Paul swore a blue streak under his breath. What's going on? It was Seth, child-free, which more than likely meant that her mother had him, which would mean going inside. He looked from Sam, to her, to Embry, and then back again, and then his eyes widened. Oh dude, really? He said to Embry. She's my fucking sister, man. What the? Hey Leah. Hey Jacob, you joining this party too? Well, I didn't plan to. The baby is crying, you see. She sighed and then moved to go inside the house. She stalked past Emily, who was watching Sam. For a second she turned at the door to see that they had marched Sam off into the woods like a human sacrifice, and she frowned. Seth was gesticulating wildly at Embry, who turned and caught her eye. For a second the two of them looked at each other, and then Seth pulled him into the forest and he was gone too, and looking around at the people who didn't notice what had happened and the one woman who, like her, had, Leah decided there and then that she was right in thinking something very odd was happening here, and that she absolutely did not want her or her son to be a part of it, and if Sam had a problem with that, she thought opening the door. Then, to coin Seth's very childish phrase, Sam couldn't fuck himself. She was Leah Clearwater. Sam Yulee was not going to tell her what to do, in which Leah, her mother and Emily all come face to face. She stepped into the house and without looking took Jude off her mother and placed him on her hip, and then immediately wished she'd not. It was not like the entire room had gone quiet, but there was a definite hush. There was a muttering, a look. She hugged Jude on her hip and stared at the wall opposite, and then, "Fuck this," she muttered, and then she turned around and walked out. She was not doing this, she was really not. What the hell had she come here for? Absolution? Penance? Closure? None of those things were possible if she was being honest with herself. She walked to the car and then, Leah, oh God, it was her mom. She turned to see her mom standing there looking at her. She was dressed in her funeral clothes, and still, even though she had just buried him today, Leah half expected to see her dad standing behind her. Mom. Her mom looked at her. Leah was still aware that Emily was on the porch watching her. It's a good to see you, Leah nodded. She really didn't know what else she was supposed to say to that. I'd say it would be good to see you too, Mom, but today it would be a bit of a lie. So there was a pause and then, I missed you, Leah nodded. Mom, you have a baby now? Yeah. Seth tell you his name? Jude. Yeah, his lovely Leah. He looks just like you actually when you were a baby. It threw her for a second. Really? And then, because she liked to stick the knife in, she said, Not Sam? Please, her mother said dismissively. That boy is a Clearwater through and through, Leah snorted before she could stop herself. Her mother took another step closer. Jude was falling asleep again now, and she brushed one finger down his chubby warm cheek. Oh Leah, his lovely, she whispered. Leah looked at her and felt the righteous anger drain out of her and be replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. Right now, looking at her, her mother looked old. She looked tired and broken and old. I'm sorry about Dad. I know, sweetheart, I know. I know why you didn't want to come back either. Sam wants to take him, she said quietly. Her mother looked at her for a second and then, Leah, you could have called me and I would have been there. God, when I think about what you must have gone through alone, pregnancy, birth, those few months where it feels like you're wading through treacle. He was an okay baby, Leah said suddenly. He was a very good baby actually. And he was okay in labor. Her mother shot him a long look and then she looked away, suddenly unable to not giggle at the thought of the snake oil she was trying to sell. Yeah, okay, that was shit, she said finally. And you know why I couldn't call Mom. Leah, I know that you think I chose Emily. You did choose Emily, not Leah. Her mom ran a hand through her dark hair. It is not as simple as a choice. Your father and we agonized over it. We didn't plan to, when she sighed and looked out over the tree line, and then, I need to tell you the truth and I know that you need to know it. I need to get Billy and Quill and Sam. What the fuck has Sam got to do with it? Everything, Leah, her mom said, and there was a tinge of exhaustion on her face. Everything. For a moment the two of them didn't speak, and then, I am sorry if you feel like you had to stay away because of me, she said. Please do not think that this decision has been easy on me, because it wasn't. It nearly killed your father and Seth. My God, Seth couldn't be in the house with either one of us for weeks. He was so angry, Leah. I thought he was going to kill Sam at one point. Leah had an image of how that was going to happen and winced. She felt a tremor of anger flow down her spine. Mom, I don't want to talk about Emily anymore. Not when she's on the porch. Not when she came with you to the funeral and I didn't, and maybe that was my choice, Mom, but if you have ever loved me then I need you hear me when I tell you that Sam wants to take Jude. A crease formed in the eyebrows and Leah knew just like that she had lost. Leah, I am sure that Sam doesn't want to take him off you. Mom, he just stood in the yard and said as much. Her mom was silent for a second and then, why would he say that? Leah shrugged, but her mom could read through her in that superpower way that moms had. Leah, what is going on? I am leaving, okay? I am going back to Hawaii and Sam's a little boy who doesn't seem to get that there are consequences to his actions, and he got wired and then Seth and Embry were there and it all just seemed to kick off. She trailed off as she saw the look on her mother's face, but her mother didn't say anything for a second. Instead she looked out over the tree line as if she was thinking very hard about something, and then when she looked back Leah held Jude a little bit closer. There was an eon of sadness in that gaze that she didn't think she could understand, nor did she ever want to. For a long moment they stared in silence at the other, and then her mom smiled sadly though her eyes were full of tears. You grew up was all she said quietly. You grew up and you had a baby and you didn't feel like you could come to me, and now you are leaving and taking my grandson away from me, and I understand why, but I won't pretend that I am not hurt by it. Leah stared at her and then her mom reached out and touched one long finger over Jude's curls. You be a good boy for Mama, okay? She said, and then she was gone before Leah could ask why she was giving up that easily, or what it was that she was hiding, or that she too had missed her. She watched for a second and then she opened the car door and put Jude back in the car seat. His head lolled to the side and she tucked him in with his bunny, and then, Leah, oh shit, Emily. She turned and shut the door. There was a second where they stared at each other. Emily looked dreadfully uncomfortable, it had to be said. Good. And Leah refused to believe that that might make her the bitch. Some authors would write her as the villain in this story. In taking back her narrative she would refuse to be one. Emily, can we talk for a moment? Civilly? She shut the door and turned and raised one eyebrow. Emily nodded as if she knew that it was going to be the best of the best. I wanted to say I am happy to see you. Really? Yes, Leah, I am the mother of your fiancé's son. It was said as flatly as she could, and Emily flinched. Leah took a bizarre and rather brutal satisfaction in terms of victory. There was a pause and then, so what did you want to talk about? Because if this is a prelude to you asking me to be maid of honor, then your answer is no with a capital F. Emily looked at her and then, this is painful for me, she said. Finally you came back with my fiancé's son. And before you start by saying what I know that you want to say, I am aware that by putting the ring on my finger I hurt you. But between you and that door is Sam's son, and I am the woman, for better or for worse, that Sam is going to marry. So I feel like we should talk. Leah could feel her head throb. Oh? There was a pause and then, all right, she said finally. I will give you the bare bones of what I told Sam. He gets access, he gets it on my terms. And you know what, Emily, you get none. You don't get to see my son. Sam will get to see my son when I decide. You do not. Perhaps history would remember her as being petty or bitchy or whatever. Leah didn't care. She didn't care then and she didn't care now. She cared only on the sleeping baby that was behind her. Emily jerked her chin upwards and Leah stared her down. So that's your play? That's the only play you get? Emily, I would rather put myself in the ground than have you take my son. You've took too much from me already. So Sam, he gets a choice. And I hope the two of you enjoy rehashing your relationship over it. She turned to open the car door, but Emily got there first. Leah raised an eye. Emily was 110 pounds. Granted, Leah was not Kate Middleton, but she knew she could throw this bitch across the hood of her car if that was what she wanted. Leah, he doesn't deserve this. Neither do I. Neither does your mother. This bitch. Calm, Clearwater. Calm. Leah stared at her. I didn't deserve what the two of you did to me, she said flatly. I didn't deserve to have my best friend run off with my fiancé. He wasn't your fiancé at the time. Emily, I swear to God I will give you a new set of scars if you finish that sentence. For a second Emily looked at her and then she rolled her eyes. Leah felt the urge to claw them out of her face with her bare hands and present them to her son as shiny new toys to play with. She tried to temper down the anger that had arisen in her. This was why she had not wanted to come back. La Push was an insidious place for her. She was always going to be the villain in the love story. Even when she wasn't. There was a moment where she was sure she could not speak, and then she looked at Jude's sleeping face and sighed and got herself under control with a considerable effort. Emily, I don't say this to hurt you for once. But you are not a factor in this decision. I know that you seem to think the world revolves around you, no doubt aided and abetted by my mother, who despite her loving speech to me just now will still pick you no matter what. I know that to Sam if I leave it works as long as I leave my son so you and him can play happy families, but let me tell you something sister, that ain't gonna happen. This is my baby, my decisions. I made the decision not to tell Sam, and as Sam has just found out, his rights don't exist. Yours are not even a pinprick in the sky. Sam gets what I have given him and he will make do to make it good enough, otherwise he can kiss that goodbye. You get what you are given. You get my boyfriend, you get my mother, you get my engagement ring no doubt, and you get the house that I was going to move into. Sorry sister, you ain't getting my son on top of that. Now as this is a funeral, my father's that you and Sam have managed to make all about you, I will not throw you bodily over my car, but if you don't move your scrawny ass out of the way I will do just that. She smiled as she said all of this. She kept her voice calm. To anyone looking, it was a perfectly respectable conversation. Only Emily knew what it was. She dithered for a second and then, I didn't want to hurt you, Leah. That was never part of the plan. Aha. Tell me, did you think I would jump for joy when I walked in on you and Sam? She shook her head and her eyes were filled with tears. Leah felt no pity. Leah, I didn't want it to end like this. Yeah, well, that makes two of us. We can find a way to make this work. We need to find a way to make this work. Sam is not going to go away. Leah could concede the point on that one. Why hadn't she left Jude in Hawaii? Sam can go to the fucking moon for all I care, she muttered. Emily tilted her head to the side and then, an Embry? What about Embry? It threw her for a second and Emily saw it and she pounced on it. Well, you and him. Emily, unlike you, I don't throw my panties at the first man I see. Embry and I met an hour ago. For a second something flickered before her eyes as if Leah had unwittingly told her something, and then she nodded. Don't go. Why? Because this is a fight nobody want to have, me or you, but Sam will have it. Leah, I know you think I am your enemy, but I'm not. I just want to move on with my life. Works for me, and this is not going to help. Leah stared at her and then she rose one eyebrow. Emily sighed as if Leah was the one being difficult, and then she took one step aside. Leah got in the car. He will try and stop you, she warned. Let him try, Leah said. Her words, however, had taken root. It was time to go. Now, Embry is having the day from hell and then he finds out that Leah is leaving. This requires something big, something massive, but then fate throws him a bone. Or the weather gods do anyway. Embry was not having a good day. To be fair, nobody was, and he didn't want to detract from Seth and his grief, but the truth was he was not having a good day. My sister? Seth muttered as they sat on the Paul's porch. He had opened the bottle of vodka and shot Sam a look that just dared him to fucking try it when he drank it straight. Considering they couldn't get drunk, it was pointless, but it did make a load of teenage boys feel like rebels. If the whole stalking vampires thing didn't make them feel like it enough. Yes, Embry said finally. It was your sister before, you know? This, Seth shot him a long look. Well, he said finally. Could be worse, he shot Sam a poisonous look. Sam wasn't even looking, so it didn't matter, but Embry did. And more to the point, so did Jacob. You're not happy, he said quietly. With him? What, serving under the bastard who hurt my sister? Who I loved like a brother and who ripped apart my family with his own selfishness? Who is now over there pouting like a little fucking child who's 3 years older than me but could give me orders like that? He snapped his fingers. And somehow has the power to gag me. No, Embry, I am not happy. Believe me, if I could control this shit I would, but I can't. And even if I could, I would stick around simply because I am not going to let my home go to rack and ruin under blood-sucking vampires, even if some of them are actually okay. But when I can control what I am and what I do, I am fucking out of his pack and I am not coming back. Seth paused and took another swig of vodka. Jake clicked his fingers and Seth wordlessly passed him the bottle. Jake was an odd one with Sam. There was always an undercurrent of tension between the fact that at any given moment Jake could become alpha. And while Jake would rather make nice with Edward Cullen than do it, it didn't mean that it couldn't happen. There was a pause and then, so are we gonna talk about it? Talk about what? About the baby? Jake said quietly. Course Sam didn't put in a phone call to my dad to ask him how he was doing. He did it to see if he could get her to stay. Can he? 60 years ago maybe, but let's face reality, people didn't like us then and they don't like us now. Courts are always gonna side with the mother over the father. That's a God-given reality unless Sam can prove she's unfit, and seeing as Rebecca's is up to her neck in this, I don't see my dad letting him do that to his best friend's daughter. Embry chewed on his nail. She's going to leave, Seth said quietly. Once she does, she is not going to come back. I'll go after her, Embry said quietly. You going after her is not what I am worried about, dipshit, Seth snapped. Their hushed whispers got the attention of Sam. For a second he looked at them as if he was strangely envious, but then his eyes clapped onto Embry and it was cold. There was always an edge of coldness between him and Sam that he was quite sure had not existed before. When they had been cordial to each other, when he had transformed for the first time, the entire secret was out, and that made life exceptionally difficult for them all. Embry was under no illusions that it sucked for Sam, but it was worth pointing out that a big brother had really not been on Embry's Christmas list. Sam came over. So you imprinted, he said flatly. On the mother of my son. Ironic, Embry deadpanned. You will get her to stay. Seth snorted. Sam, God couldn't get Leah to do shit. I really don't know how you think. I am not in the habit, Embry said softly, of ordering women to do what I want rather than the other way around. If that's the relationship you want, lucky Emily. Leah's a free woman, she can do whatever the hell she wants, and I think she's made it clear she doesn't want you near her. Hard to imagine why, Jake muttered. Embry tried to hide his grin. Leah was the living embodiment of what Jake really hoped Bella Swan would turn out to be. Pity it was a disappointment all round for him. Sam seemed to shake for a moment and then, she's not fit to. Sam, Paul said lazily. I love you, but if you dare imply in front of me that a single mother cannot raise a child, I will beat the shit out of you. 'Cause I think my mother did a damn fine job of raising me. Sometimes Embry thought, watching the wind go out of Sam's sails, Paul really could surprise you. She cannot take my son. All ears to get her to stay, Embry said, looking at his brother. If this was any other situation he would pity him, he really would. He knew it was ripping Sam apart. The one thing he had never wanted to be was his father, and here he was, his father. In the flesh. I don't, Seth? Oh, I am not helping you, Seth snapped. Don't you think you've done enough damage to my family for one lifetime? And with that he stood up and walked away. Jake sighed, cracking his neck from side to side, and then he stood up and loped off in a way that was almost casual, if it wasn't for the fact that he was following Seth, probably to make sure the kid had someone with him when his temper got the better of him. Seth was good like that. Seth was good, full stop. Sam sat down next to him. I know you don't like me, he began. But I didn't want this. I didn't want it for her or for me or for you. Aha. Pointless to suggest really that he not sleep with his almost fiancé, best friend and closest female family member. Once upon a time Embry might have done just that, but the proof was in the pudding. He knew way too much about imprinting now. I don't want to be my dad, Embry, our dad. Embry turned to look at him flatly. We were both raised by single moms, Sam. There's nothing wrong with it. No, Sam said quietly. But you and I both know what it's like to want our dads there instead of our moms. I don't. Sure you do, kid. But Embry was already shaking his head. I don't, he said flatly. Did I want to know? Yeah, but that was only so I could key his car. Do I hate that we are here in this shithole? Yeah, because everyone looks at me like Sam. She was 17, my mom. Same age as Leah. And she did it on her own, with everyone looking at her like scum because she broke up unintentionally a very toxic and unhappy marriage. I didn't want my dad in my life. I never have, I never will. Sam was silent for a second and then, Embry, if we have ever been friends, if you ever want to be brothers, you will get my name on that birth certificate. So what, you can take him away from her? No. So what? Course she won't let you take him, and she won't. Will you go to Hawaii and play dad up there? No. Then what do you expect? What's she supposed to sit here and watch you play Happy Families on the weekend with her son and another woman? It was beggars belief really that Sam did not get this. I don't know. Embry sighed and then he stood up. Where are you going? To see my imprint. Are you going to tell her? Embry stared at him. You want me to drop the whole tribe shit on the day of her father's funeral? She needs to keep him here because of that, Sam said, and suddenly he was fired up as if the answer to his problems was all solved. He's my son, he has my blood, he has my genes and yours, he added almost accusingly. He has to stay here, she has to keep him here so I can make sure he is safe. Aha, he said, looking at Paul for help. Paul shot Embry a long look as if to say that he was not getting involved, but that he somewhat agreed with Embry's view that Sam was going round the bend rather rapidly. No, she is keeping him here, Sam said, standing up. Not to rain on your parade, Sam, Paul said casually. But I don't think telling the judge you're a werewolf is going to get you custody of your son somehow. Sam ignored this. He is staying here, he said to Embry. I don't care if she goes, she can leave him here, but he is not going with her. And with that he turned around and walked off. Embry took a deep breath in and then another. He found that he was shaking. Paul watched him wearily. You all right, kid? Embry closed his eyes and concentrated on breathing. He thought of Leah, of her smile and the way that boy had been in his arms, warm and inviting and so delicately precious, of the world that she had that he wanted to step into, of leaving this shithole behind and being with her. Of the domesticated sleepy breakfasts and mornings and little shoes scattered on the floor, and when he opened his eyes again he found to his great surprise that he had it under control. Paul watched him for a second and then, "There's nothing Sam can do," he said finally. "And he knows it. He can make her stay." "He can't," Paul said easily. "You didn't know Leah before this, kid?" "Not really." "I did. God couldn't get her to not do something." "Never mind, Sam. Billy is too afraid of Sue to do anything. Quill might, but he's a half-broken reed and this isn't 1989. Nobody can make someone stay on the res." "My perspective? Sue is gonna want a relationship with her grandson. She'll play it by Leah for a while. Sam knows it too. He could get visitation. He could. My guess is he will. But she seems to want to do it on her own terms, and if she gets a sympathetic judge." He shrugged and leaned back. "Imprinting man," he said, shaking his head. "You gotta fucking love it sometimes, you really fucking do." Embry watched him go and then turned and walked off. He wanted to see her again. Leah opened the door to the hotel to see Embry. He looked shattered. Jude was asleep in his little cot and Embry standing there looked at her very hangdog. Leah stared at him and then up and down the corridor, which was ridiculous. But then again she didn't know if Sam had sent him. "Sam doesn't know where you are," Embry said quietly. "Do you know that it takes a hell of a lot of time to get hotels to release guest information? You're the 11th that I have tried, and I had to sell a sob story that your mother was dying and you had to come back to the hospital immediately. Fortunately the clerk believed that shit, if you can believe it. I'd change hotels if I was you." "Embry, what the? I don't want you to leave." "Oh boy, look, I said all that I had to say on the subject at the funeral." "Not for Sam," Embry said, looking furious. "For me." Leah stared at him. "Beg your pardon? Oh fuck, I am getting this wrong, but Leah, there are so many things about La Push that you don't understand or get, and I thought you wanted to stay and figure it out." "I did." Then Emily told me that Sam wanted full custody. She used those words? "To that effect. You gonna look me in the eye and tell me he doesn't want the same?" "Honey, he can want what he wants, he isn't going to get it. Sam's not used to being told no." Leah snorted. No, she supposed Sam was not used to being told anything he didn't like. Worst thing this tribe could have done was given him a position of authority. She still didn't know why they had done it. Embry sighed, leaning against the wall. "There is so much I want to tell you, but I am not sure how much I can adjust, and if I tell you I'm scared you'll leave. Or that Sam will use it to get you to stay and then come with me." It was a ridiculous idea and it showed on her face. She knew the second that it did because he smiled. "I'd go in a heartbeat. You just met me. Sometimes that's all it takes." A part of her wanted to fall into his arms. Another part of her wanted to shut the door in his face. "You're not alone, you know," he said carefully. "You have more allies out there than you know. Doesn't matter, Jude's too important to mess around with." Embry nodded. "So your plan is to go back home?" "Was until the weather got in the way. No, I guess I have to find out a way to get back to Hawaii that doesn't involve planes." That had shocked him. She could see it and it made her want to laugh, but right now she was on the cusp of either crying or dragging him back into the room with her. "Oh, yeah. Flights cancelled for 2 days. So there's that. Enough for Sam to get a court order if he wanted." "He won't." "You're awfully confident." "I don't think Sam knows what the fuck he is doing." "Look, I don't know how it works, I really don't, but you've given him some rope right up to him if he uses it to hang himself or not." He said it carefully and Leah considered it for a second. In truth, she knew the law was more on her side than Sam's. But still the thought of co-parenting with him, with Emily, of having what she had wanted so badly once twisted and poisoned. "I can stay here with you if you want," Embry said quietly. "I don't have to go anywhere. If you want me to stay, I can guard your door." "Thought you said he couldn't find me." "Well, I'd change hotels. This one seems to give out personal information to anyone," he began, and she laughed, unable to stop herself. It was hard for her to admit it given her personal history, but she trusted him. She really, really trusted him. She trusted him more than she should, more than she had any right to. She wanted him to what she wanted she was entirely sure was inappropriate with her child in the room, and despite what he had offered she was not in the habit of taking barely legal kids with her across state lines. That being said, she did want someone she could trust. And she did want him. Unashamed of it, she wanted him. "Trust isn't something I do," she said finally. "So if I let you in, not just this hotel, but if I let you in," she said, hoping he would get it, "then I need to know that I can trust you. Because everyone, with the exception of Seth, has betrayed me over this man. I cannot take anything else. She trailed off. She couldn't finish the sentence anywhere, but it was the truth. She had been betrayed many times by this man. She would not know. She could not take another time. And not from this man whose very presence was screaming at her to trust in. Embry took a step forwards into the room. This between them was still totally unlabeled, and Leah liked to think she had more class than to take him to bed right now, but he was safe, she realized. He was making her feel safe. "I promise you," he said, and there was a vow in there even as he took her hand, "that I will not let anything happen to you. That I will protect you, and that you can always trust me." Always, Leah. It was monumentally stupid to trust Sam's brother, to trust this kid that she had just met, and yet it was like her soul was crying out for her to trust him. And so she nodded, opened the door, and he slipped inside. And she didn't look back. It was just that simple. Chapter 1 ends here. That is for today, guys. Subscribe for next chapter.